I'm George Waddell. I'm Performance Research and Innovation Fellow here at the Royal College of Music. The Centre for Performance Science is a partnership between the Royal College of Music and Imperial College London. We've been based here for over 20 years now, and our focus is to understand performance in all of its facets, how people learn to perform, how people teach performance, how people practice their performance, how they execute performance, and also how performance is judged. And we're interested in performance across the entire pathway of that journey, from where and when people first start, all the way up to the very highest levels of performance. Now, as part of our partnership with Imperial College, we're interested in performance across domains. So we put a lot of focus into musical performance and how we musicians learn our instruments and learn to perform for audiences. But we're also very interested in how other performers approach their craft, whether it's in sport or business, in medicine, in magic. There's lots that we can learn from different kinds of performance and how that can inform what we bring back to the practice room, what we bring back to our teaching and our stages. But often we're exchanging with them what we've learned from decades and indeed centuries of musical practice, and how that can inform other forms of performers, whether pilots or surgeons or CEOs, how they can do what they do. Now, technology plays a central role in a lot of our work. Technology can help us capture performance, so measure what's going on in the room, what's going on within the instrument, what's going on within our bodies and our brains when we perform, and helping us understand the process of learning, the process of taking in performance. Technology is very important because it helps performers do what they do. Technology is embedded in the instruments that they learn on and the tools that people use to create and consume music. And there's a role for us to play in helping shape those technologies and expand the possibilities of what our performers can do. And of course, technology plays a large role in how performance is taught. And again, we're very interested in playing a role in developing those technologies, testing those technologies to see how can we help a teacher and a student communicate, or how can we help a performer reach an audience in a different part of the world, or a teacher reach a student in different geographical locations. And indeed, how can we help performers prepare for the stages that are to come later in their career, and all of the different things, the different environments, the different factors that can change when you make that transition from a practice room to a stage. So right now I'm sat in a room that we're very excited about here at the Royal College of Music. This is our new performance laboratory. Now, this builds on over a decade of work that we've done at the Royal College of Music and in the Centre for Performance Science of developing performance simulation as a way for musicians and performers of all kinds to transition from the places where they practice and where they learn and where they rehearse to the places where they perform to audiences, to judges, whatever that might be. Now, over the last 2 years, with some very generous funding from the Arts and Humanities Research Council here in the United Kingdom, we've been able to build a state-of-the-art performance laboratory, really pushing the boundaries of what we can do in simulating different performance environments. So that includes recreating actual spaces and projecting them onto the walls around the performer. It means filling those spaces with virtual audiences that can react in different ways, that can respond to the performer, that might even distract the performer to help them prepare for those distractions in the real world. It means a room where we can change the very acoustic of the room at the push of a button so that it sounds and reacts to the performance in different ways, the same way you might change the lighting, which of course we can also change here. We even have a piano that can play itself. We can simulate the very accompanist that a musician might bring in with them. So it's a space that's very versatile. We can change the room while people are performing, help them learn how to adapt. We can recreate very specific scenarios, help performers prepare for specific performances they have coming up. We can also use it to recreate the feeling of performing and the conditions of performing, the way you feel, the way your body reacts, so that we can understand it in a very controlled way. So take the opportunity to measure what performers are doing, measure their movement, measure their heart rate, think about what they're thinking, measure where they're looking, to help us understand the act of performance when and where it happens in ways that isn't always possible on an actual performance stage where things can be very complicated, very messy, where it can be hard to study in detail when we have an audience present. But in our laboratory, we can really put a magnifying glass on performance when and where it happens in ways that aren't possible anywhere else in the world. In the 10 years and more that we've been working with performance simulation at the Royal College of Music, it's been very interesting to see the different ways our students and our teachers put it into practice and use it to expand the way they think about performance training. So, of course, this might be taking your repertoire that you've learned and making sure your memory and making sure the performance holds up to the pressures of the lights in your eyes and an audience in front of you. But it can also mean preparing for the other aspects of performance, how you speak to an audience, the way you walk on stage, the way you prepare for an audition or a jury, and the questions that they might ask you afterwards, all of which we can simulate in our space. We've been working very hard to embed these technologies and these techniques into the core teaching here at the college to make sure that our students have the ability to use these technologies in the ways that they want to, and for their teachers as well to incorporate that into their teaching. And we see a real powerful possibility of these technologies being useful in a whole variety of settings. So indeed, other conservatoires, other schools of music, where musicians are preparing for professions in their career and preparing for the very highest levels of musical performance. But there's also great potential in the entire pipeline of musical training, right from where musicians start, to individual teachers, to primary and secondary school music curriculum, particularly where young performers might be taking the stage for the very first time. And we can have spaces like this to help them ease into performance, maybe performing first for an empty hall and then bringing in that virtual audience, a few people at a time, experimenting with different lighting and different acoustics to help ease them into the very idea of performing. So this is why our performance simulations we've developed in a whole range of complexity. So we can have the very complicated, the very expensive settings like this that uses the very latest technology. But we also have versions that are quite simple, a single screen, a few lights, a bit of simple recording that could let anyone recreate a simulation in their teaching studio, in their practice room, in their room at home. We've also started work on taking these virtual simulations and putting them into augmented and virtual reality headsets. And this is something we're in the early stages of. We're very excited about the potential here of how this will help people around the world and in many different settings be able to experience these kind of simulations and incorporate that into the way they learn and teach performance. What's very exciting about the world of performance simulation is there's a whole range of ways that it can be incorporated into your practice, and in particular using a concept that we work with called distributed simulation. And what this means is that the simulation doesn't just live in a computer or in a virtual environment. It blends aspects of the virtual, of software, of hardware and the equipment we use, as well as a bit of theater of the people involved. And I think many, if not all, musicians have experienced this in some way. Any time that you've gone to prepare for a performance, but maybe done a bit of a dress rehearsal, maybe you wear the clothes you are going to wear or the shoes you're going to wear, you bring in a few friends or family members to play for, you're creating a little bit of a simulation. You're trying to put yourself in that mindset, in that feeling of what it is like to be on the actual stage, so that it's a bit less of a shock when you walk on that stage for the first time. Now, what simulation technology lets us do is just push the boundaries of that a little bit. And we'll be very keen to see, as more and more people adopt the use of performance simulation the way that we have, the different ways that they put that into practice. So it might be hanging a few lights in their space that shine in your eyes and shine on your instrument to give you that sense that you're under the spotlight. It might even just be a still image of an audience there in the corner of your eye that gives you a sense people are there. Or maybe a recording of an audience that you can play back on loop. Or you can push it the way we have and build entire virtual worlds where at the push of a button we can make the audiences respond in different ways. So each level lets you simulate a wider variety of experiences and gives you a wider array of factors that you can prepare for and experience in your practice. But it doesn't mean that you have to start with the giant simulation with all of these technologies. You can start very simply and build up from that. And it's one of the things that we're very keen to do as we develop these technologies, is to constantly review how many of them are easy for us to share with the world and help others adapt the way we have with performance simulators in music schools around the world. But also how many of these technologies that we can make commercially available so that musicians and teachers are able to access them and incorporate them into their practice. And that's something we're looking at very closely, and we encourage people to watch this space as some of these technologies will hopefully be available quite soon to teachers around the world. So here we are in our Britain Theatre at the Royal College of Music. So this is from a real three-dimensional scan of our space, which we've recreated in a virtual world in the Unreal Engine. And because it's a virtual world, it means we can change it in real time. So we can, for example, bring the lights on and off, plunge it into darkness, or maybe just bring those stage lights back on, which will come on not only in the real world, but it will start to glow and light up our audience as well. So helping performers prepare for those different lighting conditions of performance, lights in your eyes, audiences that are either very easy to see or maybe obscured in the darkness. Now that audience itself, we want it to react in different ways. So for example, as you're waiting to perform, that crucial period where we know that the anxiety about performance can often peak, that audience might be chatting away with itself. And you might be backstage listening to these conversations happening. And then at some point, perhaps the stage lights come up and the audience quietly takes their seats. And as we walk out to stage, we receive our applause. And of course, in the silence, we start performing. But here, the audience isn't always passive. Sometimes there are small distractions that can take us out of our focus. And it's our job as performers to help get back into that place, to not lose our place in the piece, to help get us moving again. So our simulation allows us to create those distractions. It might be quite subtle, a bit of a cough, or perhaps a sneeze somewhere in our audience. Maybe a phone rings. And again, as a performer, we need to be able to keep going and react to that. No, we have a range of other distractions. And of course, once we've made it to the end of the performance, again, we might see that applause. And because it's a virtual world, we can have our audiences naturally move through different stages of applause, depending on how excited they were about the performance. I'll bring the lights up here a bit so we can see it. So it might start quite polite. And then grow bigger. And of course, very impressed. So that feels quite good. Now, sometimes our audience isn't as responsive, and sometimes we don't even have that full house. So it was important as well to be able to decide how many people are in attendance. Sometimes it can be, of course, quite difficult if we have an audience that isn't entirely enthusiastic about what we're doing. Well, how do we come out to that energy and bring our full energy as a performer? So this is something that we can practice for and prepare. Now, we can simulate a number of our spaces here. Another one is our performance hall, a performance space just below our feet from where we are now. And in this space, we can again place an audience, but we can also place that dreaded audition panel. And this is where we can really test the focus of our performers and help them prepare for the quite intense situations that they will prepare for. When they walk in the room, they'll be greeted, and that perhaps might be a quite enthusiastic greeting.
Hello. Please start whenever you're ready.
But it might be a bit less so.
Come on, let's have it.
So already a bit of tension in the room, a bit of anxiety as we approach the instrument. Now when we're done playing, we might be dismissed in again, a quite positive way.
Thank you. That was excellent.
But it might be not so positive.
Thank you for coming.
And of course, there might be that worst case scenario, an interruption.
Thank you. I think we've heard enough.
So in developing the simulation, we captured the real movements of a performance capture artist. So the actual gestures, the movements, even in the small things like looking down and reading your notes or perhaps someone looking at their phone very distractingly in the middle of a performance. These are actual human motions captured in motion capture and fed into this virtual world. And all of the voices you hear, these are voiceover artists where we recorded dozens of different phrases in several different voices. So depending on who speaks any one line, we can have it come from different members of the panel. We can even swap in different panel members so that every time you come in, you're facing a different audience. And from our controls, we can have them ask entire sets of interview questions, asking about their futures, about reflecting on what just happened, asking them to repeat certain parts of the performance. So from this, we can craft an entire audition, a post-audition interview. We also use it for public speaking training, for preparing for interviews, pitching ideas to potential customers or investors, for those with an entrepreneurial bent. So across these simulations, a wide variety of ways to mimic those conditions that performers will face in the real world. And because it's built essentially in a video game in this virtual world, it's something that we can and are constantly be iterating and adding to, updating as we come up with new ideas, new scenarios that we want to create. Now, a crucial part of these simulations and a very exciting aspect of this room that we're in is being able to simulate not just the visual environment, but also the acoustic environment. So if we were to simulate, for example, our main concert hall here at the Royal College of Music, which as you can see is quite a large, quite a grand space, any musician walking in there and noting that, well, the room doesn't sound nearly as big or nearly as exciting as a room of this size and the scope should sound, well, that might help take them out of the simulation. They might not be able to fully immerse themselves in it. So in this space, we've installed a Meyer constellation. So this is a series of 64 speakers, over a dozen microphones, and a large supercomputer out the back. And what the room does is it picks up all the sounds of the room. Any music we play, anything we say, even the drop of a pencil, any sound in the room will be picked up by the microphones in the ceiling, sent to the supercomputer, which we can then ask to simulate the acoustic of any space that we might want to create. So for example, if we want to hear how it sounds here in our concert hall, I can just bring up our concert hall setting, and now in real time, we have that large, grand, reverberant space matching what we see here. And we can push this to further extreme. We can simulate an entire cathedral, for example. So an acoustic simulation like this, it gives our students an incredible ability to immediately compare different acoustic environments, how they sound in a space like this versus how they sound in a space like this, and the way that they might approach their music differently, the way they might speak differently to accommodate that. Now, this is quite unique in the world, and indeed the only space in the world where we've combined this kind of acoustic simulation with these visual simulations that we've created. It's a one-of-a-kind space, but we do hope that it doesn't stay that way, and we're looking forward to playing a role in helping conservatoires and music schools and performing arts institutions around the world develop their own versions of these performance environments.